Yeah.
Okay, George, if you could just introduce yourselves a little bit for our audience.
Yeah, of course. So thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this opportunity. So I'm George Taylor. I'm a senior scientist at Maltus, a London-based startup. We're focused in the cultivated meat industry. Specifically, we do provide affordable, scalable growth media to the cultivated meat industry. So if you consider the cultivated meat producers, those people that are going mining for gold, we're the company providing the pickaxes that allow them to do so. The reason we have gone after growth media specifically is that it currently accounts for about 60 to 80% of the whole process cost for the cultivated meat production. So therefore, it's a huge bottleneck in terms of limiting the cultivated meat, reaching price parity with the conventional meat that is on our supermarket shelves now. And furthermore, it's less of a thing now, but certainly originally, the growth media that's typically used for growing cultivated meat was animal derived, which in itself poses a lot of problems for an animal-free product. So that's why the company has certainly gone after growth media. Maybe we'll touch on it a bit more later, hopefully. And then to give a little bit of background for your audience, I gained my training in synthetic biology through a PhD and 2 postdocs at Imperial College London, before then moving into the startup world, originally with a company called Better Dairy, who focus on producing animal-free dairy proteins, before then moving to my current position at Maltus, where, as I said, we focus on growth media.
Sure, yeah, that was a great introduction. So I think there is quite a few different areas of this industry, sort of the animal product industry, that seem to be targets for synthetic biology. You mentioned the sort of proteins and the media. Do you know of others that are out there, or?
Yeah, so I think there's lots of kind of products in this space which synthetic biology is kind of helping to enable, I suppose. You have cultivated meat, where synthetic biology is helping you produce new cell lines, or well, I should say animal-free meat firstly, and then new cell lines with better doubling time, reaching higher cell densities. Synthetic biology might help or is helping produce new animal-free or novel scaffolds that will improve cell adhesion during your culture process. And you've obviously got synthetic biology helping the growth media production, so producing animal-free cheap ingredients that go into the growth media, but also producing maybe some novel ingredients that haven't been created before, which again might help your cell lines reach higher cell densities during the cultivation period, or have a faster doubling time, or maybe reduce the number of times that you have to replace or exchange your media during a culturing period. So that's very much within cultivated meat. But then beyond that, I touched on animal-free dairy products. So you've got Perfect Day, who are producing huge amounts of dairy proteins that they're using to sell. They're selling whey protein. They've got their ice cream brand Brave Robot, where they now have 8 different flavors of ice cream, which they sell in the States. You've got Gelator, who are making animal-free collagen for the cosmetic industry. You've got the Every Company, who are producing chicken-free or egg-free egg white proteins. And I think they've just published in the States last week or the week before, you can now pre-order kind of animal-free macaroons, which is really cool. And then kind of moving away from food, you've got leather. There are companies like Modern Synthesis or Bulk Threads, who are producing kind of, I don't know if they're leather alternatives. I think Bulk Threads is certainly a kind of mushroom leather that's now been incorporated into kind of shoes with Adidas. So I think the emergence of how synthetic biology can enable this animal-free product, whether it be food or textile, is kind of really starting to emerge and grow.
So all of those industries would rely on the media, is that correct?
Sorry. No, maybe I wasn't clear there. I think the media we produce at Maltus is specific to cultivated meat. I think I can give that a bit of a broader answer. The media we produce can be used for mammalian or avian cell culture, but there is, mammalian culture can be used in cultivated meat, but it also has applications clearly in pharma, biopharma, where it's been used for many, many years in very developed, established processes to produce pharmaceutically relevant proteins or compounds. The reason the biopharma industry hasn't worried about growth media before is because they haven't had the consumer demand for it to be animal-free, which there obviously is in cultivated meat. And also they're producing high-value products like antibodies, etc. So they don't have to, they're reaching their economics is a lot more favorable than the cultivated meat industry, where you have to have we're producing a bulk product and it needs to be done very, very cheaply to allow that meat the price point of that meat to compete with the meat that's currently on our supermarket.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's used in academia for R&D throughout, anyone who's looking into kind of mammalian or avian cell culture. So it's got plenty of applications, but not within, say, some of the others I mentioned there.
Sure. Yeah.
So
okay.
You mentioned how sort of your media, that usually the media would I believe it would be very costly in the production of cultivated meat.
Yeah.
In what ways does your media sort of reduce the cost?
Yeah, so as I said, kind of the growth media can account for 60 to 80% of the whole process cost. So it's a huge limitation for the industry. So and one of the major reasons it is such a cost is because it contains lots of expensive ingredients. So traditionally, people might have used FBS, fetal bovine serum, which is derived from the slaughter of pregnant cows, but people naturally want to move away from that from ethical animal welfare reasons. But FBS in itself has problems associated to cost and batch-to-batch variability, and potential for kind of routes for introduction for zoonotic diseases. But then we're moving away and we're kind of allowing price parity to be reached with our growth media Proliferum M by producing lots of the ingredients in-house. So, there is certain kind of cytokines that go into media, which cost kind of £1 million to £16 million per gram. So, they're as expensive, if not way more expensive than diamonds. It's ridiculous. So, so we produce these very cheaply in-house along with other ingredients. So, with our growth media, we kind of look at what goes into our formulation and kind of we can work out quite simply what are the most expensive and we need to replace those. What are animal derived? We replace those, and what are food safe, and we replace those, which gives us our own product, which we can then sell.
Wow, that's crazy that they are that expensive. I think from
it really is.
Is it like issue purifying those proteins that's the cause of that cost, or?
And probably not the easiest proteins to produce. They are trickier to work with maybe than other proteins. I think that will contribute. I think how people approach purification, everyone will have their different ways they're doing that. And there is certainly, the purification is certainly an area you can save cost in, or can, depending on the purity of which what you desire for your own product, can be, quite a costly process. They're probably expensive because they're purified proteins, and what they've been used for is not in an industry that has previously required them to be at very, very cheap prices.
Right.
That would be my guess.
Yeah.
But I don't know that for a fact. So you wouldn't quote me on that.
So, you briefly mentioned sort of the ethical and those sorts of concerns around animal products. What is it that makes you think it's so important to sort of move away and focus on this industry with SynBio?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. So I think there are a huge number of reasons for why I and many others think cultivated meat is the right way to go. I think if you look at current conventional or traditional farming approaches how we get our meat as we know it now, it's unsustainable. contributes more greenhouse gases per year than the transport industry. It uses huge amounts of our clean water. It uses huge amounts of arable land. So it's a hugely unsustainable process in that sense. It's unethical, as you mentioned, Luke, in terms of the animal welfare, and consumers are becoming increasingly concerned and aware of this, and rightly so, not liking that. As I mentioned earlier, there's kind of a significant zoonotic risk with consuming animals. Current traditional farming approaches use 50% of the global antibiotic consumption usage.
Wow.
So that's huge, which obviously can be associated to the emergence of superbugs. But I think similar kind of irrelevant of what you kind of think about sustainability or the animal welfare, I think something that's really kind of important for people to be aware of is that using these conventional farming approaches that as we know it, there will not be enough land on Earth to grow enough animals for meat use, for meat consumption at the rate in which our population is growing. So by 2050, there will not be enough land to support our population using conventional farming approaches. Therefore, again, as I said, irrelevant of what you think about sustainability or animal welfare, new, novel, innovative approaches to farming meat are required. And that's kind of how I see cultivated meat. It's the farming of meat. It's not the farming of animals.
Right.
Farming of animals is incredibly inefficient. You have to grow sorry, Sarah, but very briefly, you have to like grow the crops. That takes time. Then the animal is grown over many years. You then have to process that animal, slaughter, process, consume. Whereas the whole farming of meat, the cultivated meat, is process that can be done in weeks or a few months. So it's a much more efficient process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good answer.
I was about to actually ask about how long does it take to sort of firstly, what measurements do you use to determine how much meat you're producing, and how much meat can you produce per, let's say, like per week in comparison to sort of traditional methods, let's say?
Yeah, so I'll be honest, I'm probably not the best person to answer this question, right? Because we focus on the growth media. We grow, of course, the cultivated, relevant cell lines for the cultivated meat industry, and it's very important that we do that. So we have an understanding of how our media, can be used or performs, how relevant cell lines perform on our media. So we do that. And then the metrics we look at, to answer your question in terms of metrics, would be what are kind of the doubling times. So how fast do the cells grow, and what cell density do you reach? So how much bang for your buck do you get? In this given volume of media, you get this many cells total. And I think they're good metrics to use. But in terms of how much meat you might get and some of the other questions you asked, Sarah, I don't think I'm probably best fitted to answer that question. I'd probably be guessing and far off.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So what is it about synthetic biology in particular that is being applied to this media? Sorry, you may have mentioned that. I might have missed.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I think I probably briefly touched on it before, but we can kind of go over it a bit more. So synthetic biology can help growth media, I think, in a few different ways. It can help produce cheap ingredients, which is essential. It can help produce or provide animal-free ingredients, which is important or essential. And then it also potentially opens the door to engineering novel ingredients, which can again help maybe doubling times, cell densities, or I know I mentioned this earlier, but minimizing media exchange, because that in itself is costly. So for a typical cultivation period, when you're growing your meat, your media needs to be exchanged a number of times, and that's a costly process. And that's not necessarily because all of your nutrients within that media are depleted or degraded or consumed. There's some of them, certain ingredients degrade or deplete, and therefore the whole media is often replenished just to, supplement or replace those few ingredients that were depleted, degraded. So if you can improve some of those ingredients, you might be able to reduce the amount of times your media is exchanged, and that will have a huge cost saving on your production process.
Right. Yeah, sure. And so trying to find, say, like make cheaper ingredients and novel ingredients, you would be using sort of, I mean, we've had conversations about this before, but for maybe people who've not listened to those conversations, how would you go about doing those sorts of things?
So I guess in a kind of simple sense, engineering living cells to recombinantly produce certain proteins,
Right.
introducing the foreign DNA that encodes the proteins or products we care about. We use a number of different living cells as our hosts, bacteria, yeast, etc. And the reason we use different ones is some are better than others for certain products. We don't really care what product we use. We care about what gives us the most product in the most economically suitable or best way. So that's what we care about. And then in terms of finding new products, lots of very there's a whole different array of different protein engineering approaches that can be taken. And we look into, again, what fits best our needs, and what's going to get the job done. We care less about the specific technique. We care more about how we get there or what the end result is. And the way we get there doesn't really matter. What matters is the end result in our case at the moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. What is the sort of, I guess, the state of this industry at the minute? Like, what sort of products are out there? I mean, you mentioned a few already. I think it'd be good to focus on that a little bit.
Do you so specifically in terms of cultivated meats? I mean,
yeah.
So I think rather excitingly, the Netherlands just legalized tasting events for cultivated meat last week or the week before. So that's pretty significant. That's really exciting, and hopefully that will kind of maybe help bring other countries or allow other countries to follow suit, or help other countries follow suit. Yeah. Singapore is obviously a really, really exciting hotspot for cultivated meat, where you can consume cultivated meat-based products in restaurants out there. In terms of other countries, I think, to the best of my knowledge, they're the only two where such public kind of consumption can be carried out. But companies like Upside in the States have been very open about working with the FDA from day one, in terms of making sure, like, what is the smoothest and the best way to get their product through regulatory approval. And I'm sure lots of other companies are doing the same all around the world. But they're the only countries that I'm aware of where the public can consume cultivated meat. But yeah, there are other exciting products, like I suggested earlier, with Perfect Day and their ice cream. And every company with their macaroons. I mean, and Impossible Foods, of course, Impossible Foods with their burger, right, which has got the kind of soy, legume, hemoglobin in. So that's really cool. So I think it's really starting to take off. Well, it already has taken off, I think, probably arguably. And cultivated meat is now hopefully the next stepping stone.
Yeah, it all sounds pretty exciting. It'll be interesting to hopefully try it out in a few years, maybe, when it's out there.
You go to Singapore now.
I could, yeah. What? So I think I read. I don't know if you know much about this. It's okay if not. I think I was reading on the website that your company sort of uses machine learning to try and improve its technology. I don't know if was that correct in reading that? Do you know much about it?
No, I do, fortunately. But I mean, I'm probably not the best person to. We have better people in the company to talk about machine learning than me, that's for sure. But machine learning, I think what I'd say is machine learning offers a huge potential. You've kind of seen the recent advancements with like what AlphaFold can now offer, what other companies in this area are doing. So it offers huge potential, and we're trying to exploit it, like many other companies, to make the most of our product and get the best out of it, really.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You mean like using machine learning to sort of optimize your sort of what you add to your media and how it's sort of this media selectivity, do you mean?
Yeah, well, ingredients, what goes in, how we can improve it. It's got multiple applications in our overall process. There's multiple places at which we use it.
Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah, it's always pretty exciting to think about how it might be integrated with science and automation and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. Is it so? Do you use automation with the machine learning, or is it sort of like
So automation is again a part of what we do at our company. We, as you can imagine, screen large, many different numbers of formulations of our media, and it's kind of not possible for us to do all of this manually, or if it would be a hugely exhausting timely process. So automation naturally fits in very well with allowing us to reach the high throughput kind of demand, if you like, of kind of a startup environment.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of startups, it might be interesting to speak a little bit about your experience there. And so you were at sorry, I've forgotten the name of the first one.
Okay, Better Dairy. I moved from academia to starting with Better Dairy.
Yeah. How was starting that? What was your position in that company?
Yeah, so I moved from a postdoc, my second postdoc, to Better Dairy as a synthetic biologist. And it was a fantastic opportunity for me to understand what the startup world was like. You know, moving from academia to startup is a change. There's no point pretending otherwise. But I loved it. It was a very different way of working. You know, rather than having an individual project, you're working as a team to overcome one overall end goal. And that's a really fun way of working, that kind of collaborative nature. You know, you have kind of the key milestones that if you meet soon can allow your product to kind of reach the market, you know, really quickly. I found it more, I felt like my research could have a quicker effect, you know, a quicker outcome or impact is the word I want.
Yeah.
Than I did in academia. But you know, that's because also I moved into food tech, which is really exciting and receiving a lot of hype, quite rightly, in my opinion, at the moment. And so yeah, it's, you know, I really enjoyed the transition, and I kind of would recommend anyone having a go at it that's interested in it, because it's a really fun work environment, very fast paced, and you know, you need to be creative at troubleshooting on the spot, but they're fun.
How large is the company that you work for?
So obviously after Better Dairy, I moved to Maltus as a senior scientist, and I look after kind of what we call the ingredients team, which is effectively the team that is accountable for, you know, responsible for producing and testing all of the different ingredients that are needed in our media, Proliferum M. Our team, the company, is 12 at the moment, but you know, we've doubled in the last year, and I'm sure in the next year or so that's only going to happen again, even more times over.
Yeah, I think it's great to see all the growth in the biotech sector.
I think the startup kind of scene in the UK at the moment is in a really exciting position. I think there seems to be lots of startups popping up the whole time, which is really exciting. And I think it's a really exciting time to be in kind of a startup or symbiote startup in the UK at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. Did you find many people in academia sort of in the mentality of starting up startups and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think synthetic biology is obviously a very applied field of science. So lots of the research that happens in SynBio is commercially applicable. So, you know, there's often a lot of talk about how would this kind of help the real world? How might we spin this out? Yeah, I think that's exciting. That was certainly something that was kind of apparent in my PhD and postdocs, that kind of conversations from other people. And, you know, we had, when I was at the beginning of my PhD, the 2014 IGM team from Imperial, I think it was 2014, spun out their company, Custom M, which is now Pure Affinity. You know, and that started it was obviously a SynBio project for cleaning water. But that's moved more I believe, in kind of a chemical direction as they've slightly pivoted towards the best way of resolving the problem they're addressing. You've got Glenn Goers, who's a friend from Tom Ellis's lab. He's started Basecamp Research. There's lots of, and there's Chiara, who's a friend who started a company called BrightCure. So there's lots of kind of companies coming out of, I'm going to say Imperial because that's where I'm from and they're the people I know, but it's not just exclusive to Imperial. There's lots coming from many different places at the moment.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. How did you hear about the opportunity in the startup? Was it sort of advertised or was it something new?
Originally when I transitioned from Better Dairy, they reached out to me, which was, they were advertising the position, but they reached out to me and asked if it was something I would be interested in. And it's always something I've thought of doing, trying the startup world, and it just came at a nice time, a good time for me. I decided to have a go. Yeah,
seems to have worked out very well.
Yeah, I think so too. Thank you.
I think a good question to end on would be, what do you think are the biggest hurdles, I guess, in the meat industry at the minute, the cultivated meat industry? And then what might the industry look like if those were overcome?
So I think that's a nice question to finish on. I think the biggest challenges are cost. The meat is still more expensive, or the production of the meat is more expensive than what is in the supermarkets now. There's taste. I think people are really focused on getting the economics right at the moment, but the taste also requires a lot of attention. And there is a scale. The industry needs to be scaled to a beyond where it ever has, a point beyond where it ever has been before, if enough meat is going to be produced for it to have a meaningful kind of impact in everyday life. So I think they are three huge challenges that need to be overcome. But I believe all are possible. I really do. And I think kind of in the next 10 years, everyone's pushing really hard to make sure that cultivated meat is at price parity with traditionally farmed meat and, on our supermarket shelves. I think that's where I'd like to see it in the next 10 years. And I think with the way the industry seems to be pushing and working, I feel that is possible and achievable. Yeah, I hope so. So do
all right. Do you have any more questions, Sarah? No, all done. Do you have anything else that you wanted to mention, George?
Not particularly. I think it's nice to mention that we're hiring at the moment, and we're looking for any enthusiastic, motivated individuals. I think experience is obviously important, but in the startup world, motivation and enthusiasm is just as important. So, if people are interested in working in this area, reach out. We are hiring. And thank you for your time.
Mention that to my friend.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been great actually. Thank you.